In this video, we'll be discussing using dVeloper in Avid Media Composer. dVeloper is part of the dTective suite of tools for forensic video analysis from Ocean Systems. So let's talk about how it all works. dVeloper is a frame averaging plugin. Frame averaging is essentially a time-lapse process where the software combines frames of video together to create a single image, and dVeloper can average up to 100 frames. And we'll get into how that all works as we go along here. So let's take a look at some footage to begin with. I have some dance recital footage, and the reason I'm showing this is because I wanted to show what happens when you have movement in the video versus when you don't have movement, because frame averaging is essentially like time-lapse photography where the frames of video are combined together, which means if there's any movement you're going to get some blurring. If there's no movement, you can actually pull details from the video. So having footage where the subject is still is essential in order for this process to work. So let's look at this clip and we'll apply dVeloper to it. I have it open, so I'll mark an in point and go to the end and mark an out point. And I can either create a new sequence by right-clicking here and choosing new sequence, or since I have nothing in my timeline currently, I can just push V on the keyboard or press splice in here in Media Composer. And when I do that, Avid creates a new sequence, which I can rename if I click on it and just call it recital. Okay. So we'll apply dVeloper to this clip. Just go to Tools and open the Effect palette, which is right here. Go to the dTective category, find dVeloper, and there's a couple ways to apply the effect to your clip. You can either drag and drop like so, and I won't do that just yet, so I can show you the next method. If you go into segment mode, highlight your clip, then double click, that also applies it. So when you first apply dVeloper, it's going to ask you how many tracks are you working with. Most of the time you'll choose one track of video. What this is for is if you're digitizing analog video from an analog source like a VHS tape, you could actually digitize the footage multiple times, apply that footage to your timeline up to 24 times, and let dVeloper develop up to 24 tracks of video. This used to be called dVeloper 4D, but we have just incorporated it into dVeloper. So in this case, we only have one source of video, so we'll choose one track of video. Click OK. Okay, so the effect is applied, and now we need to go to the effect editor, and there are two ways to do that. The first way is right here. This is the effect mode button, so I can click that, and here's the effect editor. Open that up a bit. The other way to do it, let's close that, is to go to Tools and Effect Editor here, and that opens the effect editor. We can close the effect palette, we don't need that anymore. And here is the dVeloper effect editor. Okay, and right off the bat, you see there's a region of interest and there's a histogram. We can drag this region of interest over the area we're trying to isolate. So what I'm going to do here first is show what happens when you have movement in video. And I'll move this histogram over to get it out of the way. And then I'll isolate these dancers, and you can drag the right side of the box, the left side of the box, any of the four corners, top and bottom. So if I drag from the top, I can resize it top down, right side, left side, and the bottom. Now you can see that the footage is blurred quite a bit, and I can choose to make this in color. I'll just change the mode here real quick to RGB. All right, I'm going to take the position indicator back to the beginning by pushing home on the keyboard, and you can see what's happening. dVeloper works by averaging frames going both forward and back. So right now I'm at the beginning of the timeline, so it's averaging 100 frames forward. But if I was to move this position indicator forward a little bit, and then let's change the timecode display to frames up here. So we'll go to Sequence, Frames, Absolute. You can see I'm at frame 94. So now what dVeloper is doing to average 100 frames, it's looking 50 frames back and 50 frames forward and creating an average of those pixels here. So of course it's blurred. We can change this to something smaller, 16, and you can see that that blurring is reduced a bit. And if we were to play this, let me take this back to the beginning of the timeline by hitting home on the keyboard, and then watch what happens to the dancers when you push play. Everything is quite blurred. So that's what happens when you try to average footage with movement, but what if there's no movement, like down here in the crowd? So I'll hit home on the keyboard to take it back to the beginning. And let's move the region of interest down to the audience, and you'll see that without movement, you start to pull out some details. Let's change the frames to 100. And then we'll isolate the crowd a bit more, and there they are. So if I play this, you'll see the dancers aren't blurry anymore, but the crowd, you can actually see some details, because in general, audiences in a performance don't really move very much. So if I play this, you can see detail down here in the crowd. So I just wanted to show an example of movement versus no movement in footage, so you can see how you can pull detail out of your video footage. So let's look at another clip. This plate footage. We'll close the effect editor. Some plate footage, and let's create a new sequence out of this plate footage. So we'll right click, choose new sequence. I'll call it plate, and drop this in the timeline by pushing splice in. I can also push V on the keyboard. That'll drop it in, and there it is. And we'll go to the effect palette. So I'll drag and drop dVeloper to the clip on my timeline. We just need one track. Click OK. Close the effect palette, and then go to the effect editor. Okay, so we talked about what happens when you open the effect editor initially. Here's my histogram and my region of interest. So I can go ahead and isolate the license plate in this clip. Just like so. And let's talk about the settings on the region of interest here. And by default, by the way, the frames always default to 100, but you can always drag this slider to the left for fewer frames, or to the right for more frames. And you can even highlight this little slider, use your number pad to type in a number. So if I wanted a 50, for example, just like so, or 100. So region of interest, you have display results and ROI only. That means only show the results of the frame averaging inside this box. If I deselect that, you'll see the entire image is frame averaged, just like so. So I'll reselect that. And then auto set contrast values, what that means is as you drag this box and isolate an area, dVeloper will do its best to choose the best contrast values, and those contrast values are shown right here in the histogram. So if you want to adjust those, you can actually drag these sliders. So this is your black value, this is your white, that's your midtone, and you'll see that when I did that, auto set contrast levels has been deselected automatically because I went ahead and readjusted them myself. And one thing to keep an eye on when you do this is, with this deselected, if I were to choose a different area in the video, it's using the values I chose for this area. It didn't auto set the contrast levels. So if you move that region of interest box and you want those levels to be automatically set, make sure you reselect auto set contrast levels, and it will readjust automatically, just like so. So I'll put this back on the plate, and we'll talk about the histogram in a minute here. But for now, let's talk more about some of the other stuff down here we have. So we have green as the mode by default. These are color modes. So you have RGB, which is red, green, and blue. That's full color mode. So if I was to just turn off the display results and ROI only, you'd see the entire frame averaged video in full color. Let's turn this back on. There's an average. That's an average of your red, green, and blue channels. Luminance channel. You see there? Red channel, green channel, and blue channel. And the reason that these are even an option is that certain channels are cleaner than others when frame averaging. And we actually found that the green channel, more often than not, is the cleanest. And so that's actually the default mode that dVeloper works in. And we'll keep it at green for the mode here. All right, moving down to the enhance section, you have a sharpen slider. Drag this to the right, and you'll see that the frame averaged area gets a bit sharper, and go to the left, and you have less sharpness. Then you have black, midtone, white, and midtone gamma tension. This all relates to the histogram. So if I drag the black to the right, you'll see that this little box here, little triangle here, will move to the right. You can see that. So you can do this either by dragging the black slider, or click the little triangle there, drag it over, and you'll see that slider moves with it. Same with the midtone. This is midtone right here. Drag that to the right, and you'll see the midtones are adjusted, which you could do by dragging here as well. And of course white. Here's white. Same thing there. Just like so. And then midtone gamma tension, what that is, you can adjust the tension of this line right here. So if I were to drag this over, and I want this line to change in tension, I can drag this to the right, and you'll see it adjust slightly. And it just kind of depends on your footage how much adjustment you'll want to make there. But you can see that tension is changing as I drag the slider. All right. So let's go back and reset the auto set contrast levels, because that works pretty well here. And then down here you have ROI. What this is region of interest. So if you wanted to use the sliders to adjust the region of interest box instead of dragging the box manually, you can do that with these sliders here. So top, left, bottom, right. So if I want to change the right side a little bit, you can see you can do it that way. Okay. And bottom, left, top, pretty self-explanatory there. Down here you have histogram display, show histogram, so this will disappear if you turn it off and reappear if you turn it on. And if you were to move the histogram someplace else and you want to put it back where the default position is, you can reset histogram position just like so. And then if you want to reset everything to its default value, you can click that and everything goes back to where you started. I'll undo that. And of course that's your license if you need to license your software. Now if you want to save your settings, click this little icon here, the little plugin icon, drag it over to your bin, drop it on, and you can rename it. So dVeloper plate, enter. If you want to delete the effect, this is remove effect right here. That will remove the effect from your clip on your timeline. It's gone. If you want to reapply it since you saved it, just drag it from your bin right onto your clip and click OK, and your settings are right back where they were. And that's how you work with dVeloper in Media Composer.